One of the most nebulous, cerebral parts of world building is just figuring out what kind of universe it is you're creating. What makes it unique, what inspired it, what's its tone or vibe, all those things that can be really hard to actually explain. So far, we've talked about all the different options for worlds you might create in terms of genre, or where they fall on scales like hard sci-fi versus soft sci-fi. But again and again, we've needed to reinforce the fact that ultimately these labels will not fully encapsulate whatever it is you're trying to build. Its fantasy is technically an answer to what Middle-earth is all about, but it doesn't quite capture the nuances of the world. So in this nice and brief episode of The Way of World Building, I want to explain one method you might use to distill your world down to its core elements, tenets, pillars, whatever you want to call them. The things that make up the foundation of your world and ultimately mark it as something unique. Although let's preface that by first reviewing why you might want to do this in the first place. That's it, nice and easy in this episode. Okay, so what's the benefit to this process? Well, I have a mind like a steel trap. But like a steel trap that's been on an Australian fishing trawler for a bit and got all banged up and generally abused. Maybe a shark got in there, who knows? It'll probably hold, but I wouldn't want to trust it with anything important. And that's a rough place to be starting from in a world building project. If you're not familiar with this series, we're not producing this guide in isolation. To serve as a case study, we're also in the early stages of creating our own fictional universe. That means at some point in the future, as this project continues, I'm going to be saddled with a ton of different documents and notes, and I will need some way to organize it. We'll have a lot more to say about this in the future. For now though, the only thing I really have to worry about is my original spark of an idea. But keeping that organized, I think, can be just as important. This universe I'm creating, I might end up working on it for years, and it's natural that my idea will evolve and change and grow, and will end up looking very different from how I first envisioned it. But there is a risk that my world might change, not because of any intentional choice on my part, but rather because I forgot or just maybe drifted away from my original idea more than I intended. If you've ever worked on a project over a long period of time, you probably understand just how hard it can be to maintain a consistent vision. So the main benefit to figuring out the core pillars of my world is that if 5 years from now I feel kind of lost and I'm not sure if what I'm working on really fits into my universe, I have this kind of compass that I can fall back on to lead me to my original vision. And depending on how your own world building process looks and the nature of your project, you might be handling all this unconsciously. During smaller projects produced by the Templin Institute, we never actually needed to write all this stuff down. They were limited enough in scope and time frame where we could remember everything well enough. For a bigger project like this though, that's not going to be the case. A lot of world building ultimately comes down to just what feels right. And on a bigger long-term project, keeping track of these core pillars might make that feeling easier to hold on to. But a potentially larger benefit to going through this process is that if you're working as part of a team, this tool, this compass, can be used by everyone to keep the tone of your shared world consistent. And if someone new joins the team, you have this easy first step in bringing them up to speed on what your universe is all about. Over the course of this series, the Templin Institute hopes to be working with multiple artists in bringing our own world to life. So we'll be including the core pillars of our world in any design brief we send out. Will that actually make the work of an artist easier? I don't know, we'll find out later in the series. So with the main benefits of figuring out your core tenets out of the way, what are the methods you might go about it? And unfortunately, this is one of those things that engineering students really hate, and all those creative types with their excessive hair color really love. In this, there are no right answers. But we did get a bit of a glimpse into how the professionals do it when Star Wars was launching its High Republic era of storytelling. Writers are constantly trying to hide the realities of their profession, that 90% of their time is spent crying in a bathtub staring at a blank title page on something that's due in 6 hours. So they put out this bit of propaganda, pretending that creative writing is actually a fun, inspiring exercise set to dramatic, tense, but ultimately non-threatening music.
This has been a very free environment for everybody to just throw things out there.
Now, I wasn't invited to that meeting, and that's their loss, so I can't really speak to what's going on in this footage. Here, they've turned the Force into a pie chart, connecting some dots, who knows. But at one point, they seem to have conducted the same exercise we're talking about right now, distilling Star Wars down to its core essence. And if you had any doubts that the foundational pillars of a world are important, not only to its creators, but also to its audience, when this behind-the-scenes footage was released, people were furious, but that's a video for another time. Instead, I'm looking at their method, and it seems like they're using the good old write a bunch of words on a whiteboard. That makes sense to me, but I'm going to switch up the categories here. Right now, at the beginning of my process, my world is just a bunch of swirling ideas in my head, vaguely resembling an angry beehive. But I think we can sort those swirling ideas into 3 basic categories: inspirations, themes, and let's call them tenets. Together, these form our core pillars. The wording isn't so important on this so much as what each category is trying to do. Inspirations is an easy one. No fictional world exists that wasn't inspired by something else. Things in this category might be other works in a similar genre, your own life experiences and interests, or historical, mythological, and cultural influences, and more likely than not, all these things merge together. The themes category is a bit more complex. This is essentially trying to convey how the world makes you feel, what emotions and thoughts is it trying to evoke, and does it have anything important to say about things like love, war, power, the human condition, whatever. And tenets are going to be the most diverse of the 3. Essentially, all the unique components and fundamental principles that give your world its distinctive identity. Tenets might include a magic system or some kind of unique technology. Fantasy races like orcs, goblins, elves, etc. might fall into this too, especially if they're a unique creation rather than a staple of the genre. Same thing with aliens in science fiction. So that, to me, is the most natural way to break down a fictional universe. And it should be at least mentioned that your core pillars, once you've identified them, don't need to be set in stone. As we mentioned, your world is going to change as you develop it, and there's no law that says you can't swap around your sources of inspiration, your themes, and your tenets as you understand the nature of your world more and more. Nor should these categories be taken as an absolute. The borders between them, and in which category a pillar makes the most sense, might be blurry at times, so don't stress too much about it. But what method are you using to distill your fictional world down to its core pillars? Does your process look anything like mine? And if so, how did you decide to label your categories? Next week, we'll be presenting the 3 options we've prepared that might become the world we're creating as part of this series. And in each video, we'll be including a breakdown that covers their respective themes, inspiration, and pillars, just like how we've done here for Middle-earth. Our next immediate episode, though, will be covering what makes a good setting. Having covered some of the basic fundamentals of world building, I'm now in a place where I have an idea of what I want to accomplish with my world. From there, I can start thinking about elements it needs and look at some shared universes in popular culture that have succeeded, failed, or struggled in this, and maybe from them learn some lessons. Until then, good luck and good world building.